Good morning, YouTube. Well, I haven't put a video up in a while, so I figured I'd throw one up today. Had my saws out, so I figured I'd give you a video on chainsaws. I got quite a few of them here. These are my two main saws. There's a pair of 455 Ranchers made by Husqvarna. About 2007 they made. They're my limbing saw, which is a 41. Also made by Husqvarna. My old 535 Jonsered, which was a pro saw when it was made, and it's got heated handles. That's the one I grab in the winter if I have to cut wood. And my very first saw is a little pole on there, and that was a good saw. I bought it for about $25 at a garage sale. It's two different colors. I had to replace the side plate on it, but it's a good saw. Never had much problem with it. I have a pull-on Wild Thing, which was my second saw. And then I've got a couple old home lights, which should run once I get to fixing them up. The one needs some carburetor work on it, and the other one there needs a little bit of TLC to both the carburetor and the clutch. But anyway, these 455s are my main saws. Very good saw. They're what's called a landowner saw. Metal gear case, not gear case, but crankcase. And very dependable saw. Now I'm going to give everybody a very good tip. I work in a small engine shop, and all your lawn equipment, chainsaws and stuff like that, you want to run either 93 octane, highest octane you can get, or RV gas. Running regular gasoline is not a good thing anymore. You run 87 in chainsaws, and nine times out of 10, you will at least cut the life of the saw in half. I've seen a lot of saws come into the shop with the cylinders burn out of them from this new gasoline. The ethanol that's putting in the gasoline nowadays is bad news for small equipment. It doesn't mix with the gasoline. Everything you got draws off the bottom of the tank. You're pulling a shot of straight alcohol into the cylinder when you start it, and that also means no lubrication. And alcohol also loves moisture, so it'll pull moisture right out of the air into your fuel. A lot of times that's carburetor trouble, and very often it's toast the saw. So do yourself a favor, either run 93 and a good grade of oil, or run RV gas, which has no ethanol in it at all. Running 87 or 89, you're asking for trouble. And don't worry about the price. How much does it cost you a couple dollars more maybe at the pump, but it's a lot cheaper than having to rebuild a carburetor or rebuild a saw. Even if you're doing it yourself, that's your time invested into it. Run 93. Be smart on it, and your equipment will love you for it. And anyways, I'm going to give you a quick lesson here on starting a saw. Now, it's fairly cold out today. You can see all the snow around. I'm going to walk in front of the camera here. Starting a saw. Most of the new saws have a primer here. This primer does not inject any fuel into the cylinder. All it does is draw fuel into the carburetor. So what you want to do on these, pull your choke on these saws. That turns the switch on and bumps the idle up, in addition to closing the choke butterfly. Prime the saw. Doesn't matter how many times you pump it, you're just drawing fuel through. This has a compression release on it, but I've never needed it. You give it a few pulls, Now usually they don't start that easy. You'll give it a few pulls, you'll hear it pop. Then you shut the choke off and give it another pull or two. And she'll start right off. That's how it should be. If you gotta pull 1,000 times, if you gotta constantly meddle with the choke and stuff to get things going, you probably should look into getting the saw repaired, because you either have carburetor problems or you got a leak in your intake. You don't want to lean out the mix on a saw. You'll trash the cylinder at the maximum and shorten the life of the saw at the minimum, because you're not getting the lubrication you should. But that's how a saw should start. And a lot of these new saws have a very, very tight tolerance on how much fuel goes into them. They're very fuel efficient, which means you can flood them very easily. It's best not to pull the saw more than 3 or 4 times with the choke on, because it's a very good way to flood it out. Now, the one problem these 455s do have is if you run the junky fuel in them, they'll get hot and then the rings stick. You lose your compression. So if you got one of these 455s that's got no compression and the cylinder still looks good in it, chances are especially if you're running 87 or 89 octane fuel, chances are you've heated it up and stuck the ring. So you're going to have to pull it apart, pull the cylinder, put a new ring in it, clean the piston ring groove out so the ring moves again, and your saw might be salvageable. Now, if you're cutting firewood and cutting wood to heat, you want something along the lines of those 455s. You can go with the Pro Saws, the XP series in Husqvarna. They're a little bit heavier saw, but I'll tell you the truth, these two 455s have cut a lot of wood, and they've given me 0 problems. I run good fuel in them. And I might be harping a little bit on the fuel thing, but I've seen a lot of good saws and good pieces of equipment come through, end up being tossed out because someone ran the wrong fuel and it trashed them beyond what they wanted to pay to fix them. Now, the little pull on there is a good little saw, but that's if you trim something once or twice a year, something along that lines will work fine for you. The Wild thing is also, it'll do a little bigger, but it's not heavy enough to be a firewood saw. The Home Lights, they're great little saws. They'll last a long time, but they're very hard to get parts for anymore. And if you see a Home Light in Home Depot or whatnot, that is not the company that made these saws. The company that made the good saws is gone, and I doubt it's ever coming back. They were bought out, and now they're making ones about the same caliber as the pull-on there. The Husqvarnas, like I said, the two 455s are landowner saws. They're about middle of the range for the saw lineup. Good saws, I like them, and I'll be running them a long time. The 41's my limbing saw. It's a lot lighter. It's a lighter duty saw. It's got a plastic crankcase on it, but I've not had real problems with it. I had to rebuild the carburetor, but that was my own fault because the fuel filter fell off and I got sawdust in the tank. So while I had it apart to clean the carburetor screen, I rebuilt the carb. Wasn't worth the effort not doing it otherwise. The 535 was my main firewood saw until I got the 455s. That saw has cut a lot of firewood. It's got plenty of power where it needs it. It always starts for me, and it's got heated handles. So that's the one I grab in the winter if I gotta cut firewood. Like I said, just want to throw a video up here, teach you a little bit about chainsaws, what I know, and hopefully this helps out somebody. And it's starting to rain on me out here, so I'm going to take my camera and head on inside. See you, everybody.